Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with the mid-year book freakout tag. And normally I try to wait to do this in July, but I'm feeling kind of inspired to do it earlier this year. I feel like I might be going through a spurt of wanting to read, and so maybe I really should have waited until July so I would have more to talk about. But this has been a very sparse year for me in terms of reading, as I'm sure you know, since I've been in essentially the biggest slump of my life. And that's made it very hard on me as a booktuber. So this has definitely not been my best year as a content creator. And really the first half of the year, I'm worried about the second half because the first half of the year I usually come in guns blazing and I want to achieve all of these goals and I have so many things in mind that I want to do. And so this year that has really not happened. Though when I looked at my Goodreads to figure out the answers to these prompts, I found that I have read 30 books so far this year, and that's actually a typical year for me. Last year and 2020 were definitely very different because I had more time to read and I had more time to film. And so I guess this year is me kind of regressing to the mean, going back to the way things were. And so I imagine that 2019, I was probably at the same amount of books as I am right now, so I'm not gonna feel too guilty about it. And those books that I have read have generally been pretty good. So let's go on and get into the questions. This is one of my favorite tags to film every single year, and it's just one of my favorites to watch. So the first question is the best book you've read so far in 2022. And there is one true answer for this, but I decided to bring two books. When I read this question, one book immediately popped into my head, and that is Demian by Hermann Hesse. This is such a powerhouse. It's a very short book, but it packs a really large punch. And I have an entire reading vlog dedicated to this, and it was such a wonderful experience. A lot of it, I think, had little to do with the book actually, and just had more to do with how I was annotating it, that I was really trying to have a conversation with the text by annotating it, which made the experience of reading it very enjoyable. And that's an added level to reading a book. So a lot of my enjoyment of this was actually not the content of the novel. It was just the experience of reading it. But a lot of it was that this is just one of the most beautifully written books I've ever read as well. This was just a genuine pleasure to read. I was reading this a little bit for a project, and I'm so glad that I started this project of kind of reading books that BTS has recommended, that other K-pop idols have recommended, because they have made me pick up books I would literally never have read. And also that just generally would never have been on my radar. And I don't think Hermann Hesse is one that would have been on my radar otherwise, but this was a genuine pleasure to read. And he is such a skillful author. This is such a brilliant book. It's not only my favorite book of the year, it's also now just one of my favorite books I have ever read. But another of my favorite books of the year is one that took me completely off guard. I thought I would enjoy this, but I didn't really think I was going to love it and be obsessed with it, but I totally was, and that was Booth by Karen Joy Fowler. What a powerhouse this was as well. Similarly to Demian, this really packed a punch in its page count, though this is a much longer book. This is like 500 and some pages. It is a historical fiction about the Booth family, and the most famous member of the Booth family is John Wilkes Booth, who assassinated U.S. President Abraham Lincoln. But this book is not really about him, it's about his family members. There is something really magical to the writing here as well, because the Booths were a family of actors, Shakespearean actors specifically. And so there is just a level of theatricality to the prose and to the way that the characters interact with each other that is so interesting to read. And it does really feel Shakespearean in tone, which gives this a real classic quality. I just was blown away by this, and I hope this wins some awards. I don't know if it's been nominated for anything, but oh my gosh, this is some of the best historical fiction that I have read in years. Best sequel you have read so far in 2022. I, for some odd reason, cannot find my set of the Caraval trilogy anywhere. I have no clue what I did with them. I honestly don't. But my answer for this is Legendary, which is the second book in the Caraval trilogy. This really turned the tone of the trilogy. Caraval is set up as a game, and Legendary kind of blows open the world, let's say. And I just thoroughly enjoyed this. This is my favorite of the trilogy, and it's actually a rare thing for me to say that I prefer the second book in a trilogy. I often feel like the second book in trilogies just bridges the gap and it doesn't really offer anything new. And I think a lot of times trilogies could have been made duologies. This was the rare exception. Caraval is an interesting one, and I have a lot of opinions about the trilogy as a whole, just because tonally, Legendary is so different from Caraval. It feels like a different series anyway, but I really loved the scope of this. I loved the characters in this, and I loved the romance in this. I think I'm actually a romance girly. I didn't know it, I always denied it, but I think I am a romance girly if it is this kind of romance. Stephanie Garber and I, we're vibing, we just get along. And I think Legendary is just a big step up from Caraval. If you've read Caraval and you didn't enjoy it, I do think you should carry on. Just try Legendary, because I think that's more an indication of what she can do as a writer. This is a really fun trilogy, and the last book in the trilogy, Finale, is also really good, but Legendary is definitely the best sequel I've read so far this year. A new release you haven't read yet but want to. For me, that is The Last White Rose, Elizabeth of York by Alison Weir. I have heard some mixed things about this already, which kind of actually makes me excited to read the book. And so this is Alison Weir's historical fiction about Elizabeth of York. I know I'm gonna have some feelings about it. And I'm really excited to explore those feelings. In fact, I think I might film a vlog around it. But some of what I have seen so far has been very negative about this book. I'm curious to see if I'm gonna feel negatively about it, because I know that Alison Weir and I don't tend to get along in nonfiction. For me, historical fiction is an entirely different realm, and I'm very forgiving with historical fiction because you have to take some risks. You know, you have to answer some questions in historical fiction. But I really enjoy her historical fiction. I really enjoy the way she writes. And so I'm looking forward to this one. Hopefully I will get to this pretty soon. Most anticipated release for the second half of the year. I really don't know what's coming out in the second half of the year. I have not been paying very close attention to book releases this year, unfortunately. So a lot of things have snuck up on me. But I am really excited for the second book in Stephanie Garber's new series. The first one was Once Upon a Broken Heart, but I don't know what the sequel is called. But definitely that is my most anticipated read of the second half of the year. I love Stephanie Garber so much. She's just a delight to read, and so I'm really looking forward to that one. This new series kind of has a wintry vibe, and so I am probably gonna save it towards the very end of the year. I think it comes out in September. Biggest disappointment. There were a lot that I could have chosen as my biggest disappointment. I have DNF'd so many books this year, some of which I will say has very little to do with the book and more to do with me being in a reading slump. And so I've DNF'd some books that I know are going to be good and that I'll really enjoy when I'm in the mood for them. But there are a lot of books that I finished this year that were just straight up disappointments to me, or I just really did not think were good. But I think a disappointment is not necessarily a book that is bad. It is a book that you had a high expectation for. And for me, my biggest disappointment of the year has got to be Pachinko by Min Jin Lee. I was stunned by this. Genuinely, the entire time I was reading it, I could not believe that this was the book everyone had talked up for years. And I always hate to be that person because I like joining in on the hype. I really enjoy when everyone is enjoying a certain thing and everyone is having the conversation. And I always hope that I'm going to love it as much as everyone else. Pachinko was the exception for me. Before picking up Pachinko, I had only heard positive reviews. After I picked it up, I have only heard negative reviews, which is so funny because now everything that comes across my feed on YouTube that talks about pachinko talks about it negatively. I personally think the history that is being talked about in pachinko is very important and is very, very interesting. And I was really glad to have been introduced to it by pachinko. And I will tell you, actually, pachinko helped me at work one day when a researcher came in and wanted to talk about Korean literature. And I luckily was able to have context for what he was talking about with the Japanese occupation of Korea because I had read pachinko very recently. And so he was talking about how things changed in Korean literature because of that. And so actually I was able to help this researcher find what they were looking for in a roundabout way because of pachinko. And I don't think I would have had much context for it were it not for pachinko, which led me down the research rabbit hole. So since reading pachinko, I have learned a lot more about this time period. And so I've really enjoyed the fact that pachinko did make me learn about a new era of history, which I just found very fascinating and something that is very prescient and very present for a lot of people. So there's a lot of good in the book, but the bad is just that I didn't really enjoy it. I was bored by it in parts. The characters acted like they were in a soap opera for the most part. The writing was so pared down that I couldn't even enjoy it on a prose level. I just unfortunately was very, very disappointed by this. And so I'm gonna give the show a try. I really am. I'm going to give the show a shot, but this is definitely my most disappointing read of the year. Biggest surprise. So this is a book that I read literally this week. And I don't think you've seen the blog yet where I read it because this is also kind of a K-pop recommendation. And this is The Devotion of Suspect X by Keigo Higashino. This is a Japanese thriller. I was so blown away by this. I picked this up because Kai from EXO said this was his favorite book. And so I was reading a bunch of books that are Idol's favorites in this vlog. And this is the one that really confused me at first because you know in the beginning, this book is a murder story. You know in the beginning who's murdered, who did it, and essentially you think you know why. So as a mystery book, it's interesting because really, what is the mystery? You're just kind of dreading people finding out about it and putting the pieces together. But at the end, everything came together so seamlessly. This book blew my mind. I mean, truly, this is one of the best thrillers I have ever read. And the whole time, the first half of the book, I'm thinking, this is fine. I almost DNF'd it once, actually, because I didn't feel like there was any mystery to the mystery, which I guess is why this is more of a thriller than a mystery. But I just was wondering the whole time, how did this become someone's favorite book? This is someone's favorite book of all time. What is it? Wait till the end. You'll find out why. This book surprised me, and it was a genuinely great surprise. And I just loved this. In fact, I rated it 5 stars. Favorite new author, Hermann Hesse. I am blown away. I have seen enough to know that he is definitely a favorite author of mine. I've read Demian, I've read Nulp, which was very, very short, and I have started Steppenwolf. I think this man was a genius. Like, just thank you, Hermann Hesse, for picking up your pen one day and deciding, hey, I'm gonna be a novelist. Thank you. Because genuinely, I have not felt like this about an author in a very long time. There are a lot of people who I say, well, they're a favorite author because I've liked a few of their books. Hermann Hesse literally feels like you were standing outside in a thunderstorm. And really, like right before the thunderstorm comes in, you know how it feels? The air changes, the hairs on your arms stand up, and then you see that first lightning strike off in the distance. That is Hermann Hesse. That's his writing. Wow, I have not felt like this since I read Anne Rice for the first time. And I don't say that lightly, I just genuinely love him. So he's definitely my favorite new author. Newest fictional crush and newest favorite character are for me the same person. I'm bringing up Legendary again. I'm bringing up Caraval again. That's Jax. Jax is the Prince of Hearts in this world, and he is technically a fate. So like people go to him when they want to find their first love, and he's cursed to like kill everybody he kisses because there's only one true love for him. There's only one person who he can kiss who he wouldn't kill. Jax is always described as like having an apple and also like blood coming out of the side of his mouth. And when you read that description, I know he is gorgeous. I know he's beautiful. Biggest crush of the year, like everything he did, I just was so into him. I also have a crush in this series though. I also have a crush on Legend, and I had a crush on him in Caraval. It only got bigger throughout the series. I don't know what it is, Stephanie Garber, the way she is writing male characters, it really works for me. But Jax, I know is hot. Sometimes you just read a character's description and you can fully visualize them. I could fully see Jax the first time that she introduced him. And I just think his character is very interesting. Technically, he is in Once Upon a Broken Heart, so he's a character I read about last year for the first time, but I really loved the layers that she gave his character. He was the character I was interested in learning more about throughout the trilogy. And so he is both my crush of the year and also favorite fictional character. A book that made you cry. I really can't think of one that made me cry this year. There have been a couple that choked me up, and really, I guess when I say I cried at a book, that's typically what I mean, that I got a little bit choked up. And so Hermann Hesse again, Demian, and Nulp most recently. I finished Nulp again for that vlog that you probably have not seen yet, but Nulp, the end, that got me choked up, so maybe it's that. But really, so far this year, I haven't read any books that were emotional heavy hitters. A book that made you happy. I am going to say The Ice Planet Barbarians by Ruby Dixon. No one is more shocked than I am that I read this and that I enjoyed it. And I'm going to say I put this on this list, and I put this as a book that made me happy because it really reminded me why I love reading. I think when you get into booktube or any kind of book content creation, I think you feel pressure to keep up with things. Maybe people follow you because you read a certain genre. Maybe people are interested in what you have to say in upcoming releases. And so you just find yourself reading out of obligation a lot of the time, or you find yourself reading things that you feel like you should read. I need to read this. I should read this. And I think you can get into a rut with reading that way, and I think that happened to me. I think that's part of why I've been in this slump. And reading a book like this reminded me that reading is a fun hobby. Reading for fun is really why I got into booktube, and I haven't enjoyed a book and had fun with a book the way that I did with this one in a very long time. And so this really, I think, has renewed my relationship with reading. I have read so much more since I read this book, and I think ultimately this really got my groove back in terms of reading. What books do you need to read by the end of the year? I really didn't make any goals for myself in terms of a specific book list this year, and so I don't have anything that I need to read. This has been a very loose year for me in terms of goals, and I think I'll probably keep it that way going into the second half of the year. But things that I definitely want to read, I really want to read more of Hermann Hesse, and I really would like to start Thomas Mann. I feel like I'm gonna like him. I feel like really in the end I'm just going to enjoy German literature, and so I need to read more of it. This is one that is a new to me author, but I think in the second half of the year I would really like to focus on authors that I know I love. I would really like to read more from authors that I know I enjoy. I often will read a book and say, that was great. I would love to read more from that author, and then I never do, or it's very rarely. It's maybe once a year that I pick up something by an author that I say I love. And so the second half of the year, I want to pick some books from some authors that I know I love that are maybe even a guaranteed hit for me, let's say. But Thomas Mann is one who would be new to me. I just really want to try him this year. So that was the mid-year book freak out tag. I would love to know down below how your reading year is going so far. I would love to know your answers to these questions down below as well. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.